I'm from the other side. I'm from the guys on the ground when something happens. And my being here is out of frustration. That's just a photo to make you happy before. So what I actually mean is that I think we should try to make information ready to go to where it's going to be processed. And I think there can be a contribution from whomever is on the ground at that time. And at most places, there's always somebody able, and we all analyze and we all look at data that is generated by people on the ground. And I think that except we are doing, people are doing fantastic things, and they are doing great ways to analyze data, to kind of sift through big data and represent it and trying it out. But at this time, we've seen these examples from Haiti. We've seen it's strange how it does not always come back to you. And I'm just thinking whether we have to wait until everything is done in the lab before we have something we can work with. And I think I'm one of the guys working just down there and you know, having to wash my hands afterwards. And I think I should be able to contribute in a way that I'm not just being there as a witness and a worker, but I am always contributing to something that is bigger than just what I'm doing right there. And I think that many people there are also wanting to do that. This is what we saw of Muzaffarabad when we arrived in Pakistan. And there was almost nothing left. Actually, that was not the place where we worked. We went, I think, 50 kilometers further into the hills where there was nobody else there. We left one day after the quake, and we arrived in a place in Kashmir where there was nobody doing operations in a 150-mile radius from where we were. So people sometimes walked 4 days with a wounded person in between them just to come and deliver them because they knew we were doing operations. So it's a very different world than what we're thinking when what we are talking about. This is actually the first lady we did an amputation. I did an amputation with. She's back there 5 days later just to show the wound, and she's doing quite all right. And it's amazing how this is different in what I'm an emergency physician, but this is so different in what we do every day. And it's so different in, I mean, we got this whole briefing about Islam and what we couldn't and couldn't do, and how ladies had to look at ladies, and then we get in the mountains and people just undress and they, you know, nobody bothers about anything. It's a completely different world, and it's difficult to describe that. This was in Haiti. We left, I think I left 10 hours after the quake, and we arrived about in the second 24 hours after the quake had begun there. We were there and we had a makeshift up and running clinic, and all the other groups were still in the airport, and the only thing was that the group we were with was not a registered NGO yet, because all the NGOs had to wait in the airport. People were dying about 500 meters from the airport, and people had to wait. I don't know, I still don't know what reason, and there's a lot of speculation that it was politics on one part and some things between the WHO and the US Army. And I really don't want to speculate, but I know that we've been there on the other side, Pétionville. We were staying and we were working on the other side of Port-au-Prince. We didn't see, except one group of Bolivians, we didn't see anybody white there for a week. And no patrols, no soldiers, nothing. And nobody was there, and people were literally lying, bleeding, not anymore, because that would be a long time. But people were lying there with broken bones and had to be cared for, and people had to be waiting. And it's strange how that didn't come back, and whatever information we could feed sometimes was even turned over in the Belgian press, and that's a really strange thing to feel yourself. We actually found a hospital there after a few days, after 3 days, that was completely empty. All doctors and all nurses left Haiti, Port-au-Prince, just after the disaster, because they were afraid of being robbed, and I guess they were the better classes, and so maybe not all, but we've seen 2 or 3 hospitals, the university hospital. There were no doctors there, or maybe 1 or 2, but it's really a strange world to get in. So I just want to say that it's a big difference when you have a disaster like a natural disaster or a mega event. The stakeholders of these things is not just the patients, it's also all the persons working there, and the ones you are or we are working for, it's the people who have been hit by the disaster, but also the people who try to care for the people who have been hit by the disaster. Alan Wechselblatt is an MIT person, and the reason I call this the Wechselblatt preparedness is that Alan Silverberg, a science fiction author, has coined the term of viridian disasters. It's disasters in which the disaster is getting worse because of human technology or human society. And even the Pompeii disaster in which people went to live there because the soil was very good. They knew they were living close to a volcano and they still took the risk. But things like Katrina, where we build things that have to withhold the water and then they don't hold, and something has to do with a fail of human technology, then technology has sometimes to do something with how big the disaster is. And they coined the term the Wechselblatt disaster. So I think when we use the same or other technology to augment our effort, I think it is good to think that it's not just the same than being there and doing stuff. I think we have software teams and possibilities to augment that effort. And that effort could be a Wechselblatt preparedness and a Wechselblatt response. My reason for being here is frustration, because usually we have a lot of chatter, and I'm concentrating on events because events are different in a big way than natural disasters, in a sense that they have a difference. There's three things in all these mega things. There's logistics, there's management, and there's medical care. And the logistics and the management in an event is different in the sense that most of the time there's already medical personnel and there's already medical technology where the event is taking place. But big mass events are, and I was going to say this even without yesterday, they're prone to things happening to them. That can be a natural disaster, that can be a targeted attack, and we know something can happen. So if we put, for the same Wechselblatt reasons, if we put 300,000 people together, we have to know the possibility of anything happening in that place, even if it's a big storm, is going to be worse than if we wouldn't have put those 300 people there. So I think we have a kind of a responsibility to act upon that, and even as people working there, to contribute to how this information is being sent and processed. And this is my only cluttered dia, and I hope that I will be able to explain on this. So what we do right now, and the most of what we do, is that all this effort is coming from inside the labs, from inside the places where we analyze tweets, we analyze photos, we analyze films, and there is not a good way of returning that information in the beginning of a disaster yet. Also, there's especially a population profile for people going to a concert, because these people have a different profile. If you have a concert with 300,000 people, between 50 and 70% of these people have a smartphone. And many of these people also communicate what they think and feel because they already do it every day. And that's a big difference for knowing that the disaster proneness of such an event is bigger. It has to be taken into consideration that as a study model, it's a very fruitful thing to study events and to study and arm yourself for the response of an event. Also, in Medicine 2.0, which is not only using semantics and web technology and for disaster response, but for medicine as a whole, we see that the patients in that case, they do want to collaborate, they do want to contribute, and they want to be able to participate. And this participation is an important element, and I think certainly in this kind of surrounding, we can use that. We can use all the help we can get. And having all these people sitting there, a sitting duck sometimes they can contribute, and they even feel better about themselves even if they're not helped. And the thing is that it's a completely different attitude people have when something happens. I always try to explain it and for instance, it's a cold marathon. I don't know if it was cold, but it's a cold. And you see the lady say she's cold, and you think, I'm not giving her my coat, and you just put a pace on the other side and you go walk. You're not sharing as easy, but something happens and everybody, you take off your coat, you put it on the, and there's a very shift in how people relate to each other when something happens. And that also applies to the possibility that people could contribute actively to gather more information. Also, the Jedi powers of the hashtag, I'll explain to you. Don't expect big behavior changes. I don't think that at such a moment people are able to do big changes in their behavior because they're not ready to do that. But if it's just a small adaptation they have to make, and with a big effect, the chances are bigger that they are going to do that. So I kind of explained already why a disaster and event is different, because the concert we have studied the best in Belgium was not the concert which had the biggest disaster, but it has about 300,000 people going in and out in 3 or 4 days. Sometimes there's 100,000 people there. There's 5,000 people doing the response and staff and crew, and there's about 200 people of a medical. We have 7,000 people having medical care during 4 days in 3 tents, which is huge. And at this time, sometimes you're there, you have all this gear, and the response is not different than if a train would, fall off a bridge. And that's a pity. I think the management is very different and could be very different because of the communication if we structure that communication. That is also something I already talked about. We cannot just sit here and try to think what is best. We want to know what people need on the ground, and we want to know what frustrations they have and how we can help these frustrations. And we have to engage with the people on the ground. And I think that they're already tweeting, just make some appointments on how you communicate with the guys being in the labs. The specific profile, I also already told you about it. The hashtag, it looks like it's a banal thing, but it's the smallest change with the biggest effect you can ask from someone at a concert. You cannot ask them to switch software. You cannot ask them to download something. But in my view and in the view, I don't understand why some concerts do not. I think it should be like this, that everybody has a set of emergency hashtags, which also include fun hashtags, which would give some concerts much more ability to show pictures of the concert, to show problems where they are to the teams that are doing the relief. And people should be used to, for instance, having a game, or sometimes there have been things in which you can acquire prizes because of the best picture of something, and you can do reviews on the bands, and then the organization can try to get your information, put that on their side to promote their own activity, and then people get used to using the hashtags much more than just the one that is the one for the concert. And if you do a combination of these hashtags, and then something happens and they see the hashtags all the time on the screen and on their ticket and everything, it's just not a biggie to include the other hashtags. And ideally, I know most of the concerts in Belgium have their own app, and ideally, and that's what we want to do, we want to push kind of a Twitter client within the app of the concert or the happening, and so that if they want to publish a video or a photo or a tweet or whatever they want to do, they can just push a button. They don't have to actually go to shift and push and find the hashtag or copy the hashtag in the wrong way. So possibly you can structure data from the bottom line. We already do that in a sense. We don't, when some accident happens, we don't ask them to dial anybody and just say what happened, and then eventually the phone will get to us. No, we ask them to dial 911. We ask them to dial 112 in Europe. They know how to do SOS. Some small children even know the SOS Morse code because they learn in that school. We ask everybody to put seatbelts. Why? Do you need the seatbelt to drive normally to your work? No, if something happens, you need the seatbelt. So we have kind of fail-safes all over in our society. Flotation devices are that you have to have in a boat, in an airplane. The parachutes you have to wear in some circumstances. You have to wear helmets on bicycles in Australia and many other countries, not because it's so fun to wear a bicycle where it's 40 degrees Celsius, But you might fall down, and whether you're dead or not after a bicycle incident is 90% whether you're wearing a helmet or not. So it's really worth your while. And it could very much be worthwhile to structure your information from a concert too. It's not only the music things, because at music things people are just having fun and they are doing stuff. There's always bigger crowds of people walking around on a concert like that than you think, and it's just the people going there. If you have 5,000 people crew, you can almost obligate them to use these hashtags. And imagine that 5,000 people on a concert give you structured data a whole time, and then you have one of these wonderful bubble diagrams that we saw earlier on. The thing we did right now is just make columns in a Twitter client, but if you make them more haptically interesting and more in a way that it becomes interactive to look at the screen, maybe you can even wake somebody up because of its big red, bubble pops up when 112 photos about somebody falling on the ground are published on Twitter. And I think even the emergency services that care for security would be even, there's always a command center on such events, and they don't have more than a few visual feeds that are dispersed over and even if you see something happen in such a feed, it would be very much interesting to augment them with information coming from the floor. And that's what I want to say. At this time, no one is interested in tweeting about security, but they do tweet about fun, and there's more on certain concerts than on other concerts, but that will probably evolve as our 12-year-olds get 16. Sports is another very interesting thing, because there's not only the people going there and the crew, there's also the athletes. If you have a marathon, we have another project in which we say it's a really smart thing to have some kind of identification of these people, because we had a marathon and another big event in Antwerp, it's going to be next week, but a few years ago, they all have a chip when they cross the white line, who crossed the white line. And somebody like that falls down, and he's supposed to have his identity card in Europe, but they usually don't. And so somebody faints, and 52 years old, you get them in the tent, they don't even have an identity on them. And in the end, they had to put this shoe over the white line to know about whom they had in the hospital. And I think that's it's a whole different aspect. But the fact that you report on what's happening and whether, if you have an athletic game and you have 5,000 people running and at least 350 of them get diarrhea, there's something wrong, but we don't have alerts for that right now. And that's a pity. The sports is an important thing that we have to concentrate on too. And certainly a lot of things are already orchestrated in sport, so it's just a little effort to trying to orchestrate the feedback of information. Most of big events already have hashtags. People know hashtags. They are being drowned in hashtags with television series, but it's just there for fun or just for general information. And if you just follow Super Bowl 46, you can, as a private person, not do anything with it. Even if you have 5-6 people sitting in a command center, you have to look at all of them and you have to do it. There's no live analysis of all these tweets right now, not in a way that anybody there can have any, advantage from it. So I think that if you just trying to filter them on the computer side is way more difficult than just trying to categorize them when you're there, because it doesn't make any effort bigger for the guys in the labs and in the computers, but it might make it more easy. This is the concert I was already talking about, but it's another concert that in Belgium. I was saying the same thing in 2009, 2010, and they said, it's an event. Events and disaster medicine, it's just the same. And then this happened, and it was a big concert with not 300,000 people, but about 80,000 people, and it was a big storm. It lasted for 6 minutes, took 2 or 3 tents away, 5 or 6 people died, hundreds were hurt, and there was only one way in on this concert field, and they made another way in, and then the tree fell, and all texting and all telephoning, cell phoning possibility just fell away because there was so much traffic. And the only communication that existed at that time was that you could text via the web, and you could have, they still had an edge connection, which or GPRS connection, and the television forwarded images, and they could try to communicate with the television center, and so the television center fed back some information through telephone to the police, who radioed it in to the people on the field. But we had a 4 or 5 link to have some local information of a tree blocking an exit road, and that's just crazy because you know you have several thousand or hundreds of people doing the relief, and they all have radios, and they're working on 3 or 4 channels, which is not the same of kind of they call it non-interruptive communication. And non-interruptive communication is in the sense that you send a tweet and you don't need somebody to be on the other side to listen. You can either send it to everybody or you can send it to somebody specific. This is what happens in your general concert. Everybody in the public tweets and it gets into the Twitter sphere and everybody can read it, but you have to filter it out. And you know, the organizing artists, they give information on the concert and they try to give information, but it doesn't only go to the public, it goes to the whole world. They probably don't mind, and I don't mind. And then the medical and the relief people try to give information towards these people, but they are all usually just using the one hashtag that is dispersed by the concert or the event in itself. And no, I don't think you can make an app that everybody will download because something happened, but just having all the screens display 3 or 4 hashtags, at least if you have 300,000 people there, if 1,000 people know how to filter for hashtags or look for a hashtag, you know, 1,000 people who talk to 10 people and you have reached 10,000 people. And you know how that goes. Also, it's unbelievable that we don't, it's like standing in a mass and just not talk in a sense. And that's a pity. So I think that a disaster tag set and then maybe an emergency tag set could be devised, and maybe we had to think about how in an international consensus, just like SOS or 911, what we put in there. And I think a part, maybe 6 out of 10 or 12 out of 20, should be about fun and things that people want to use, just knowing that their image or their film or their message will be more promoted if they use them than if they not use them. And so they're already used to doing that in their own application. And then just when something happens, it's just a small switch to using these tags to report on something that happened. And they're already used to that. And we want to try to accustom them to using the tags for winning something or for participating in some contest. So pics and tweets of mass events, now you have to get them out of the fire hose and you have to mine them. And if you can just put in a few predetermined hashtags, even if not everybody uses them, even just several people use them, usually will be the people from whom it is interesting to hear something. And then you have monitoring, which is a lot less difficult than just data mining. And that is what I hope to acquire, because this is something that doesn't ask for a lot of work and doesn't ask for a lot of computer power. And very frankly, this is something we can do tomorrow at any concert that's happening. And if you have an emergency set of hashtag and you propagate it, nothing bad will happen if people don't use it. But if then you have propagated it and something like that happens, then people will talk about it afterwards, and maybe the next time you'll have a better data stream. Because just waiting, I mean, it's like almost a sin. So that's the same view, and I just want to sensibilize you for at least thinking of interacting with your public, not 15 days afterwards or in an ongoing effort, because in Haiti, after 1 week, the persons who didn't die from the actual trauma weren't probably going to die except from cholera or other stuff. So the relief is very different after 10 days than the first 5-6 days, in which you have really wounds that are infected and people going into sepsis because of a traumatic event. And I think this is something that we could, you know, if you have, you could even having 100 scouts within a mass that do this. And I'm a strong believer that, for instance, if you have all Red Cross people trying to use this kind of information, then you will have much more structured information than none at all, because then you get just all the information, or also none at all if you cannot filter it. And I mean, this is something, is a small festival exists, and they don't have a data department. They still can do that if they have 5,000 people being on the festival. But the same goes if you have 200,000 or 50,000. It's not important, and it's a thing that you can even do studies of before and after. And I think it would be great that throughout the world or throughout Europe we could try out this stuff, because it's frustrating, because we're the ones making our hands dirty, and we know we can contribute to the whole effort also, and we can feed information. Why would we just care for the guy that's in front of us and not try to generalize the impression of what's going on there? Because it's just a pity not to do it. Thank you.